how I will likely annotate the Declaration of Independence while I read it to my kids in a little bit. It is impolite to ghost when you are ending a relationship or quitting a job. You should let people know why it is that that is happening. But also, they wanted to make sure that they let people know because they wanted other countries and everybody in the country to understand what was happening. This was published in newspapers over in Europe. It was published over the course of the United States. And they wanted to make sure everyone got a chance to read this gathering of complaints. This is probably the most important part. They're not only saying that all white landowning men have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but they're also saying that consent is what creates government, that without consent by the people that are being governed, they do not have the right to government. They do point out that you shouldn't be changing governments for light or transient causes. Changing a government is a big deal. And they also point out that most people don't change government for light or transient causes. And what they argue is that all of the colonies in what would become the United States had been being far patient, far long, and that now they needed to list some reasons and explain why it was that they were about to ghost the king. And they have a long list. When the colonies were making new laws according to the rules of their government, he was not doing the final approval that he required. So they were being set kind of in no man's land, waiting for laws to be approved. Sometimes he wouldn't pass laws until they gave up representation, which representation was part of the deal, and only a tyrant would ask you to give up representation. He purposefully was making meetings hard to attend and at weird hours of the day, and he was not encouraging representation and legislative bodies. He was making it hard and difficult to participate in the government. He would occasionally take away their representation for disagreeing with him. And then after he did that, he wouldn't let them elect new representatives, which actually left them vulnerable to attack. This one's a little tricky. He was limiting their right to take on new citizens, which is wild. And he was limiting their ability to appropriate new land. Now, new is tricky in this phrase because other people already lived there. But it wasn't that the king was worried about relationship with those other people. The king was worried about limiting the power that the colonies were gathering by having more people and more space. The king is actively thwarting justice because he's not allowing for basic justice systems because he's not approving law. Because the judges are reliant on the king both for continued office and for their payment, they're relying on the king and are kind of in the pocket of the king. The king kept creating these new positions and sending people into them and then expecting people in the colonies to house and feed and take care of the people he was sending. Even in times of peace, when they're not at war, there were militaries hanging out, British militaries just kind of hanging out in the colonies. And there wasn't like a military base. So these military folks were just hanging out in people's like inns and businesses and taking up space and eating their food. And by having a military force living in the colonies, you have a situation where all of these people that are in each of the colonies are subject to this military force nonstop. So this is where they go through this list of all the terrible things the king has done. And they're really doing this because they want other people to know why it is they're doing this. They're not doing this to like let the king know. The king already knows. They're doing this so that they can print it in publications and pamphlets and newspapers and let other folks know why it is that they're doing this. You're letting your soldiers live among us, just in our buildings. Soldiers sometimes have strife with the populations that they're within. And when those soldiers are doing bad things, even murdering us, you're giving them these silly show trials and not taking it serious that there's a problem. You're not letting us trade freely with the rest of the world. You're taxing us without our consent. When people in the colonies are accused of doing something wrong, you're not allowing them to have a jury trial. You're literally doing things that should account to be war. You're wandering through our cities and plundering them. You're burning our villages. You're doing things that are super destructive to us. And when our own people are out there, sometimes you capture them and conscript them and make them fight us. And you're intentionally weaponizing the conflict with the indigenous people. And it just keeps happening. We keep telling you that this isn't okay. We keep naming the ways that we're not being represented. We keep talking to you about the way that we need free trade and we can't have this taxation. We keep talking to you about the fact that having soldiers living among us is going to create a conflict. And you just keep doing it. And so we're going to do this thing our way now. We're no longer going to be reliant on the crown in any way, shape, or form. We are our own entity, and we are allowed to make our own laws and settle our own problems and have our own conflicts. And the crown, the king, is not supervising us anymore. And then they sent off copies. They sent off copies over to Europe to allow it to be published. They circulated copies in the colonies because not everybody in the colonies was actually in favor of this. This was their attempt to gather support and make a legal declaration all at the same time.